Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
It had been a rough week at the hospital where I work as an emergency room nurse. After pulling 3 consecutive night shifts, dealing with everything from broken bones to cardiac arrests, I was beyond exhausted. But my empty fridge wasn't going to fill itself, so I dragged myself to the local Publix supermarket in Miami Shores for some much-needed grocery shopping. I had most of my shopping done and was now at the deli counter, patiently waiting my turn. The store was moderately busy, as expected for a Saturday afternoon. The deli area was crowded with several customers lined up to get their orders. Given the limited space, I had positioned my cart in the only spot available that wouldn't completely block the flow of traffic. That's when I heard it, that distinctive shrill voice that makes every retail worker's spine tingle. She yelled out asking whose cart it was. I didn't respond immediately, partly because I was tired and partly because I didn't appreciate being yelled at by a stranger. The voice belonged to a small elderly woman with a perfectly coiffed short haircut and a handbag that probably cost more than my weekly salary. She continued screeching about how the cart was blocking everyone despite the fact that several people were easily moving past my cart without any issue. After dealing with difficult patients all week, the last thing I needed was to encounter a wild Karen at the deli counter. But here we were. I turned around slowly and told her it was my cart. She immediately demanded that I move it, insisting it was in everyone's way. I simply asked her if she was the Publix police. She started muttering about some people these days and how things are right now, claiming she was trying not to disturb her spiritual peace. I calmly suggested that if she asked for things nicely, she might just get them. This seemed to trigger something in her, and she launched into a full-blown tirade. She complained about how I hadn't acknowledged her when she was asking about the cart, ranting about the rudeness of people nowadays. She boasted about shopping there for 20 years and claimed she'd never seen such disrespect. I cut her off, telling her that she wouldn't get to talk about me behind my back today, addressing her as Karen. By this point, several other customers were watching the scene unfold. The deli counter staff, who had probably seen their fair share of entitled customers, were trying to hide their smirks. She became indignant at being called Karen, starting to protest about her real name. I interrupted her, sarcastically asking if she'd prefer to be called Ma'am, who thinks she owns the supermarket. A few customers actually snorted at this point. She then tried to intimidate me by declaring her position on the neighborhood association board, threatening to make things difficult for me. I responded by informing her that I'd just finished a 12-hour shift saving lives in the emergency room and challenged her to try making my day more difficult than treating multiple trauma patients while running on coffee and determination. The color drained from her face as a few people in line actually started clapping. One elderly gentleman even spoke up in my defense, telling her to leave the nurse alone and pointing out that the cart wasn't bothering anyone. Thoroughly defeated and clearly not used to being called out on her behavior, she mumbled something about the quality of the place going downhill and shuffled off to the prepared foods section, where I later saw her complaining to another customer about the freshness of the rotisserie chickens. The deli worker who served me gave me an extra thick slice of my requested turkey and quietly shared that my response was amazing, revealing that this woman comes in every weekend and makes everyone's life miserable. I paid for my groceries and headed home. I'm a retired police officer who now works as a security consultant for various businesses in our downtown area. After 25 years on the force, I thought I'd seen it all, but what happened last Tuesday proved me wrong. I was heading to meet a client when I witnessed something that made my blood boil. A female college student was crossing at a marked crosswalk, the walk signal clearly showing she had the right of way. Out of nowhere, this white Mercedes comes barreling through, hitting the poor girl and sending her flying several feet. The Mercedes didn't even slow down. The driver, who I could see was a middle-aged woman with that typical "can I speak to your manager" haircut, just kept going. 25 years of police work kicked in immediately. I called emergency services while getting into my car. I quickly reported to emergency services that I was following a hit-and-run driver in a white Mercedes C-Class, giving them the license plate number and describing the victim as a female student around 20 years old. I made sure to tell them exactly where the accident happened at the intersection of 5th and Main. The dispatcher assured me help was on the way to the victim while I pursued the Mercedes. The woman was driving like a maniac, weaving through traffic, running stop signs. I kept updating the dispatcher about our location. After about 10 minutes of this chase, she approached the major intersection. The light was clearly red, but she didn't even attempt to slow down. That's when it happened. A delivery truck having the right-of-way with a green light T-boned her Mercedes at full speed. The Mercedes went airborne, flipping at least 4 times before landing on its roof. The sound was horrific. I pulled over and rushed to check on both drivers. The truck driver was shaken but okay. As for the Mercedes driver, she was conscious but trapped. She started screaming for help, trying to throw around her supposed importance by claiming her husband was a lawyer. I told her to stay still and that emergency services were on their way, but she just kept demanding to be let out immediately, whining about having an important hair appointment. Even while trapped in an overturned car, she was more concerned about her hair appointment than the student she'd hit. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. It took them almost an hour to safely extract her from the vehicle. At the hospital, she tried to play victim until I showed the police the dashcam footage from my car. Then her tune changed real quick. She started making excuses, claiming she barely touched the girl and that the student had come out of nowhere. She kept insisting she was just late for an appointment, as if that justified everything. The detective wasn't having any of it. He listed off her charges: hit and run resulting in serious injury, reckless endangerment, speeding, running multiple red lights, and resisting arrest. She tried to pull the "do you know who my husband is" card again, but the detective shut her down completely, telling her he wouldn't care even if her husband was the President of the United States. The student she hit suffered a broken leg, fractured ribs, and a concussion. She needed extensive physical therapy, but thankfully she's expected to make a full recovery. The truck driver had some minor bruising and whiplash, but his truck was completely totaled. His company's insurance is going after Karen's insurance for the full amount. Karen's lawyer husband turned out to be an insurance salesman, and she had multiple prior driving violations. The judge wasn't amused by her behavior or her attempts to blame the student. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison for the hit and run, plus additional time for her reckless endangerment of others during her escape attempt, totaling 12 years behind bars. Her driver's license was permanently revoked, and she was ordered to pay restitution to both victims. Last I heard, she's still trying to convince everyone at the prison that she's the real victim in all this. Some people never learn. After finishing my business degree and struggling to find work in my field during a rough economic period, I decided to take what I thought would be a temporary position at a major investment and pensions company. The pay was decent, and I figured the experience would look good on my resume while I continued searching for my dream job. The training was intense. 6 weeks of learning about financial products, customer service protocols, and compliance regulations. I caught on quickly, probably because of my business background, and was soon cleared to handle calls independently. Though it wasn't my planned career path, I actually found myself enjoying helping people understand their accounts and navigate the complex world of investments. However, things started getting weird about 3 months in, right as we were approaching the end of the tax year. Our call volume was absolutely insane, with customers desperately trying to sort out their individual savings accounts and pension contributions before the deadline. Most people were waiting 2 to 3 hours just to speak with someone. One day, my team leader sent me a message complaining that I was taking too many calls. He said he couldn't properly monitor my performance if I was handling 20-30 calls per day. I tried to explain that I was just trying to help reduce the queue and that these were mostly simple transfers to other departments. He wouldn't hear it, insisting that it wasn't acceptable because he needed to review at least 310 or 4 of my calls daily for quality assurance. They wanted me to intentionally slow down during our busiest period? Fine. Malicious compliance it is. The next day, I started taking one call, then literally sitting there doing nothing for an hour before taking another. I could see the call queue getting longer and longer, but hey, orders are orders, right? A couple of weeks later, my team leader called me in for a performance review. He told me that my customer identity verification process wasn't meeting their standards. When I explained that I was following exactly what we learned in training and asked him to clarify what specific standards I wasn't meeting, he just vaguely said I needed to be more thorough. When I pressed him for specific examples, he just repeated that I needed to be more thorough and told me to mark myself as in training tomorrow and wait for further instructions. I did exactly as instructed, logged in the next morning, set my status to in training, and waited, and waited, and waited. For 5 whole days I sat in my home office, playing video games and occasionally checking my email. Not a single word from my team leader. On day 6, I got a message from a senior manager asking why I hadn't taken any calls for the past 5 days. I explained that my team leader had instructed me to mark myself as in training and wait for further instructions, and offered to forward our conversation. The senior manager asked me to send the evidence, so I sent screenshots of all relevant communications. She thanked me and told me to stay as I was while she investigated. Another week passes. More video games, more waiting, still getting paid. The whole situation was absurd. I kept detailed records of all communications and my daily login times, just in case. Finally, the senior manager contacted me again. She told me that they had reviewed the situation and my team leader had been removed from their position due to multiple instances of mismanagement. However, she also explained that they were implementing organizational changes and outsourcing most of their call center operations to India. When I asked what that meant for my position, she explained that they were offering redundancy packages to all current call center staff, including 3 months' salary plus remaining annual leave paid out. I actually laughed. Not only had my team leader's incompetence been exposed, but I was getting a nice payout to leave a job that was clearly mismanaged. I took the redundancy offer immediately and used part of the money to fund a professional certification that helped me land a much better position at a different company. I later heard that my team leader had been trying to build a case to fire me for poor performance, but their own instructions and lack of follow-through had backfired spectacularly. Their removal wasn't just about my situation. Apparently, several other employees had similar stories, and the senior management had finally had enough. Those 2 weeks of getting paid to play video games were absolutely fantastic, but the sweet taste of karma was even better. It had already been a hectic morning. My daughter's dance recital was scheduled for 11 a.m., and as the lead coordinator for the event, I couldn't afford to be late. I promised all the parents I'd be there early to help set up the sound system and organize the dressing rooms. But my car was desperately in need of both gas and a wash after last night's unexpected mud puddle incident while helping my sister move some furniture in the rain. The Shell station near my house had always been reliable, and their car wash usually took no more than 5 to 7 minutes. It was 9:30 a.m., giving me plenty of time to get everything done before heading to the community center for the recital. At least that's what I thought. I pulled up to the pump, inserted my credit card, and started filling up my tank. The station was relatively quiet for a Saturday morning, with only a couple of other customers around. I got my receipt with the car wash code and drove around to the back of the building where the car wash entrance was located. That's when I saw it. A pristine blue Lexus parked right in front of the car wash entrance, completely blocking access. There was already another customer in line ahead of me, a man in a red pickup truck, and I could see him throwing his hands up in frustration. The pickup truck driver looked back at me and shook his head, telling me he'd already been waiting there for 5 minutes with no sign of the owner. I grabbed my phone and tried calling the station's number, but no one picked up. Meanwhile, pickup guy had apparently had enough and stormed into the station to complain. A few minutes later, he emerged with a staff member in tow. Behind them, taking the smallest steps imaginable, was an older woman carrying a coffee cup in one hand and a cane in the other, though she seemed to be using it more as an accessory than a walking aid. The station employee politely told the woman that she couldn't park her car there as it was blocking the car wash entrance. The woman looked utterly unbothered, taking a leisurely sip of her coffee. She dismissed the concern, explaining that she only needed a minute and didn't want to walk all the way from the parking spots, claiming her legs weren't what they used to be. She made a vague gesture with her cane while maintaining a perfect grip on her coffee cup. The pickup driver expressed his frustration, pointing out that we had been waiting for over 10 minutes. The woman patronizingly lectured him about patience being a virtue, adding that in her day, people weren't always in such a rush. I tried explaining to her that I needed to be at a dance recital where 30 kids were counting on me to be there. She dismissed my concern too, saying that everyone always had somewhere to be, and justified her actions by claiming her coffee would have gotten cold if she had to walk from the proper parking spot. She then proceeded to take what felt like an eternity getting back into her car. First, she had to find the perfect spot for her coffee cup. Then she had to adjust her seat, check all her mirrors, and dig through her purse for the car wash code receipt. After finally finding it, she got back out to enter the code, then back in again, only to realize she needed to fold her side mirrors. By this point, I was checking my watch every 30 seconds. It was now 9:45 a.m. and I still needed to wash my car and drive across town. The station employee looked apologetic but helpless as the woman finally pulled into the car wash. Just as I thought the ordeal was over, she backed out again, announcing she had forgotten to check if her windows were fully closed. The station employee finally intervened, telling her that if she wasn't ready, she needed to pull aside and let other customers go first, assuring her that her code would still work. The woman indignantly refused, claiming she was there first. I pointed out that she wasn't actually first, as she had been parked illegally blocking the entrance while getting coffee. The employee then warned her that they would have to call a manager if she didn't either proceed with her wash or move aside, explaining that her actions were against their policy and could result in her being banned from using their services. That seemed to finally get through to her. She huffed dramatically but pulled her car into the wash properly this time. As she finally entered the car wash, the station employee turned to us and apologized, explaining that this wasn't her first offense. He offered to comp both our car washes and told us that he'd taken her license plate number, saying his manager would be adding her to their banned customers list. The pickup driver expressed his satisfaction at this outcome, while I thanked the employee for his kindness. I ended up making it to the recital with just enough time to spare, though my heart was racing until I pulled into the community center parking lot. Later that week, I stopped by the Shell station for gas and noticed a new sign prominently displayed at the car wash entrance. Parking in front of car wash entrance strictly prohibited. Violators will be banned from premises. I wondered if somewhere in town a certain blue Lexus was getting very dirty with no place to get cleaned. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.